President Obama's third address to a joint session of Congress, but for the first time tonight, the nation's 44th president having to elaborate on exactly how strong the State of the Union currently is. The speech he gives tonight, unlikely to bear much resemblance to the one his speechwriters began drafting for him only weeks ago. This is MSNBC's live coverage of President Obama's first official State of the Union address. I'm Keith Olbermann with Rachel Maddow in New York and Chris Matthews in Washington. The pageant already well underway in the packed House chamber. The president's cabinet making its way down the aisle. Secretary Napolitano there, Rahm Emanuel behind her, and the ever-present Congressman Engel in place. The justices of the Supreme Court, the First Lady, arriving in the last few minutes. However, the focus tonight firmly not on the spectators, not on the call-outs to the crowd, but on the policy. White House advisors and those members of the cabinet you see in the aisle now have been leaking select pieces of what Mr. Obama will say and do in the year ahead for days now, with the message they claim that it does not conflict with what the president has already said and hoped to have done in his first year. Specifically, what about health care reform? And in excerpts released only minutes ago, the president intending to say he will not walk away from uninsured Americans, quote, and neither should the people in this chamber. Joined now, as I mentioned, by Chris Matthews in Washington and Rachel Maddow here in New York with me. Rachel, I'll begin with you. How do you step back from health care to make it a minor function of the larger economic question tonight without looking like you are, stepping back from health care?
I think that the president is going to have to make the case for following through on health reform. I mean, think about it. They've got a bill passed the House and a bill passed the Senate. What they need to do now is go that last yard. And the way he's got to make the case is by saying that it is economically imperative, to try to make it seem fiscally irresponsible to let health reform go undone. And that's a case he's sort of tried to make in stops and starts from the very beginning. Tonight, I think he'll make it in a tone that sounds very conservative. I think for everything that we've heard about this speech tonight is it's going to be a very centrist, conservative-sounding speech, not at all a rally the base kind of speech.
Well, Chris, that begs the question that is, I guess, at the heart of this, the idea of if the president's, if it's not failings, it's lack of the success he wanted and so many who saw him elected wanted. Is that the result, and have they concluded in the White House, which the answer is that the result of him being too liberal in the last year or too conservative?
Well, I don't think you can objectively say he's been too liberal. He was stuck with a terrible economic situation that he had to operate against, and if he hadn't, it would have been unpatriotic. And everybody who studies economics knows if you have no business spending, no consumer spending, the government has to spend. That is reasonable, and I would argue conservative economics. You have to do it. Unfortunately for him, the public relations looks bad because he has a $1.3 trillion deficit as a result of doing what he had to do. I do think there's one way to do the health care thing, and that is if the House would accept some kind of a deal whereby they agree to the Senate bill with the proviso they do something through reconciliation which tweaks it in both houses. Now, that's going to require a very closely run operation. It's going to require some very smart public relations along the lines perhaps of what Rachel just said, selling this as a jobs bill, selling this as economically responsible, not as social policy, but as economic imperative.
Rachel, the other topic, the thing that has been leaked out earliest among the things we're expecting to hear tonight about this partial freezing of domestic spending. This was blasted by Robert Reich, who made no secret about this. Robert Reich, who was one of the president's leading economic interpreters, if you will, during the campaign and afterwards, who commended the president's actions in terms of trying to establish both a sound economy and also establish, prove the negative, prove that he did in fact stop something horrific from happening, and we're just left with bad, and that's comparatively good. Why go in this direction? And do you think there's any kind of reaction from the White House towards the trial balloon that leak occurred, and they might dial that back somewhat?
No, I don't think they'll dial it back. I think that the reaction that they got could not have pleased them, not just Robert Reich, but a lot of economists essentially saying this is a gimmick. This will do nothing to address the long-term deficit problem, the structural deficits that we've got, and it will do short-term harm to the economy. Oh, and by the way, it scores a political own goal by conceding to the Republicans what they have long been saying about what the causes are of deficits, which doesn't happen to be true. I think it was a bad reaction. I think it's a bad policy. I think it is a gimmick from a White House that has tried to bill itself as one that takes issues like this seriously. I think it was a mistake, but I think they got to stick by it now.
Like deer coming through the woods when they hear thunder, I think the evidence here of the photographers suggests we're about to see this sequence sequence of Barry Sullivan, the Majority Floor Services Chief, to announce the Speaker, and then Wilson Livingood, the House Sergeant at Arms, to immediately follow it up with the famous call, the President of the United States. If those gentlemen come, and I think I know the gentleman in the red jacket, the red tie behind them. Let's listen.
Madam Speaker.
You're throwing a bomb, Greg.
Madam Speaker!
The President of the United States.
After a slight false start, the President makes his way down, and you can see on his on your right, Majority Leader Reid of the Senate, Mr. Steny Hoyer, Majority Leader of the House. The handshake's in progress, the tradition as old as not the presidency itself, but the modern presidency. Certainly this speech used to be delivered, essentially left on the House's doorstep. Sometimes I wonder, Chris, if that wasn't a better way of doing this. It's such theater. What is it, as we see every time we've talked about this? Does it have meaning? Does it have ceremonial meaning? Is this the sliver of monarchy that we like to have in this country?
Well, I think it gets a huge audience on television, Keith, and people do want to hear. I remember when President Clinton was in office and the pundits would say too much detail, and then would learn the next day that the public wanted that detail.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know what's going on, and they're willing to sit for an hour and listen. I think the country is democratic and it's Republican in the sense that they don't mind their representatives running the show for them, but they do want some accounting. And I think right now they do want some accounting. I think with the economy the way it is, there's tremendous fear out there right now. People are afraid, and as you know, and as everybody's ever walked the streets of a big city, when you get afraid, you get angry. And I think we have a situation where a lot of people are angry, and because they're afraid, personally afraid of losing their job, personally afraid that they've lost wealth, and that their kids will not do as well as they did. And these are real fears. We do not have nothing to fear but fear itself. Fear is a reality, and it's well-based in reality.
How apropos that you were talking about that as the President approached Mr. Geithner. Perfect timing in terms of providing caption to what we're seeing and also the thoughts. And now it's an MTV-style camera giving you a feeling of being on the floor. Rachel, I asked Chris about, and he just addressed it again, this idea, again, I'm using a word I despise for another time, zeitgeist. What is it at the moment? Is it, in fact, anti-big government, big spending, big this, big that, and can this president address it tonight in some meaningful, intelligible, and yet policy-laden way?
There is economic anxiety in the country right now for obvious reasons. I think the most important thing in the political zeitgeist is that the Republicans have decided to deal with this presidency by being sheerly obstinate, by refusing to engage constructively in any way, by voting no on everything, by turning against policies they themselves have supported or even legislation that they have co-sponsored. That has really shaped the legislative and political zeitgeist, is the Republican policy of no. And if he doesn't address that tonight, he will not have addressed what it's going to take for him to have a legislatively accomplished first term.
I think the question of personal popularity, which has not been in doubt in terms of this president, is being underscored right now. So I'll thank Chris Matthews, Rachel Maddow, who will both be with me after this speech is concluded. The president's first State of the Union address, but his third joint address to Congress. It is expected to be above average in length. There were some estimates that it might be as long as an hour and 15 minutes. And of course, starting slightly past schedule, as all of Washington does. The president now making the gestures to try to quiet the House, and we will hopefully present something of a model to the House and to the senators visiting it by closing our traps here, too. Here's the President of the United States eventually.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please. Madam Speaker, Vice President Biden, members of Congress, distinguished guests, and fellow Americans. Our Constitution declares that from time to time, the President shall give to Congress information about the state of our Union. For 220 years, our leaders have fulfilled this duty. They've done so during periods of prosperity and tranquility. And they've done so in the midst of war and depression, in moments of great strife and great struggle. It's tempting to look back on these moments and assume that our progress was inevitable, that America was always destined to succeed. But when the Union was turned back at Bull Run and the Allies first landed at Omaha Beach, victory was very much in doubt. When the market crashed on Black Tuesday and civil rights marchers were beaten on Bloody Sunday, the future was anything but certain. These were the times that tested the courage of our convictions and the strength of our Union. And despite all our divisions and disagreements, our hesitations and our fears, America prevailed because we chose to move forward as one nation, as one people. Again, we are tested. And again, we must answer history's call. 1 year ago, I took office amid 2 wars, an economy rocked by a severe recession, a financial system on the verge of collapse, and a government deeply in debt. Experts from across the political spectrum warned that if we did not act, we might face a second depression. So we acted, immediately and aggressively. And 1 year later, the worst of the storm has passed. But the devastation remains. 1 in 10 Americans still cannot find work. Many businesses have shuttered. Home values have declined. Small towns and rural communities have been hit especially hard. And for those who'd already known poverty, life's become that much harder. And this recession has also compounded the burdens that America's families have been dealing with for decades. The burden of working harder and longer for less, of being unable to save enough to retire or help kids with college. So I know the anxieties that are out there right now. They're not new. These struggles are the reason I ran for president. These struggles are what I've witnessed for years in places like Elkhart, Indiana, and Galesburg, Illinois. I hear about them in the letters that I read each night. The toughest to read are those written by children, asking why they have to move from their home, asking when their mom or dad will be able to go back to work. For these Americans and so many others, change has not come fast enough. Some are frustrated, some are angry,
They don't understand why it seems like bad behavior on Wall Street is rewarded, but hard work on Main Street isn't. Or why Washington has been unable or unwilling to solve any of our problems. They're tired of the partisanship and the shouting and the pettiness. They know we can't afford it. Not now. So we face big and difficult challenges. And what the American people hope, what they deserve, is for all of us, Democrats and Republicans, to work through our differences, to overcome the numbing weight of our politics. For while the people who sent us here have different backgrounds, different stories, different beliefs, the anxieties they face are the same. The aspirations they hold are shared. A job that pays the bills, a chance to get ahead, most of all, the ability to give their children a better life. And you know what else they share? They share a stubborn resilience in the face of adversity. After one of the most difficult years in our history, they remain busy building cars and teaching kids, starting businesses and going back to school. They're coaching Little League and helping their neighbors. One woman wrote to me and said, "We are strained but hopeful, struggling but encouraged." It's because of this spirit, this great decency and great strength, that I have never been more hopeful about America's future than I am tonight. Despite our hardships, our union is strong. We do not give up. We do not quit. We do not allow fear or division to break our spirit. In this new decade, it's time the American people get a government that matches their decency, that embodies their strength. And tonight I'd like to talk about how together we can deliver on that promise. It begins with our economy. Our most urgent task upon taking office was to shore up the same banks that helped cause this crisis. It was not easy to do. And if there's one thing that has unified Democrats and Republicans and everybody in between, it's that we all hated the bank bailout. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. You hated it. It was about as popular as a root canal. But when I ran for president, I promised I wouldn't just do what was popular. I would do what was necessary. And if we had allowed the meltdown of the financial system, unemployment might be double what it is today. More businesses would certainly have closed. More homes would have surely been lost. So I supported the last administration's efforts to create the Financial Rescue Program. And when we took that program over, we made it more transparent and more accountable. And as a result, the markets are now stabilized, and we've recovered most of the money we spent on the banks. Most, but not all. To recover the rest, I've proposed a fee on the biggest banks. Now, I know Wall Street isn't keen on this idea, but if these firms can afford to hand out big bonuses again, they can afford a modest fee to pay back the taxpayers who rescued them in their time of need. Now, as we stabilized the financial system, we also took steps to get our economy growing again, save as many jobs as possible, and help Americans who'd become unemployed. That's why we extended or increased unemployment benefits for more than 18 million Americans, made health insurance 65% cheaper for families who get their coverage through COBRA, and passed 25 different tax cuts. Now, let me repeat. We cut taxes. We cut taxes for 95% of working families. We cut taxes for small businesses. We cut taxes for first-time home buyers. We cut taxes for parents trying to care for their children. We cut taxes for 8 million Americans paying for college. I thought I'd get some applause on that one. As a result, millions of Americans had more to spend on gas and food and other necessities, all of which helped businesses keep more workers. And we haven't raised income taxes by a single dime on a single person, not a single dime. Because of the steps we took, there are about 2 million Americans working right now who would otherwise be unemployed. $200,000 work in construction and clean energy. 300,000 are teachers and other education workers. Tens of thousands are cops, firefighters, correctional officers, first responders. And we're on track to add another 1.5 million jobs to this total by the end of the year. The plan that has made all of this possible, from the tax cuts to the jobs, is the Recovery Act. That's right. The Recovery Act, also known as the stimulus bill. Economists on the left and the right say this bill has helped save jobs and avert disaster. But you don't have to take their word for it. Talk to the small business in Phoenix that will triple its workforce because of the Recovery Act. Talk to the window manufacturer in Philadelphia who said he used to be skeptical about the Recovery Act until he had to add 2 more work shifts just because of the business it created. Talk to the single teacher raising 2 kids who was told by her principal in the last week of school that because of the Recovery Act, she wouldn't be laid off after all. There are stories like this all across America. And after 2 years of recession, the economy is growing again. Retirement funds have started to gain back some of their value. Businesses are beginning to invest again. And slowly, some are starting to hire again. But I realize that for every success story, there are other stories of men and women who wake up with the anguish of not knowing where their next paycheck will come from, who send out resumes week after week and hear nothing in response. That is why jobs must be our #1 focus in 2010, and that's why I'm calling for a new jobs bill tonight. Now, the true engine of job creation in this country will always be America's businesses. I agree. But government can create the conditions necessary for businesses to expand and hire more workers. We should start where most new jobs do, in small businesses. Companies that begin when an entrepreneur takes a chance on a dream, or a worker decides it's time she became her own boss. Through sheer grit and determination, these companies have weathered the recession and they're ready to grow. But when you talk to small business owners in places like Allentown, Pennsylvania, or Elyria, Ohio, you find out that even though banks on Wall Street are lending again, they're mostly lending to bigger companies. Financing remains difficult for small business owners across the country, even those that are making a profit. So tonight, I'm proposing that we take $30 billion of the money Wall Street banks have repaid and use it to help community banks give small businesses the credit they need to stay afloat. I'm also proposing a new small business tax credit, one that will go to over 1 million small businesses who hire new workers or raise wages. While we're at it, let's also eliminate all capital gains taxes on small business investment and provide a tax incentive for all large businesses and all small businesses to invest in new plants and equipment. Next, we can put Americans to work today building the infrastructure of tomorrow. From the first railroads to the interstate highway system, our nation has always been built to compete. There's no reason Europe or China should have the fastest trains or the new factories that manufacture clean energy products. Tomorrow I'll visit Tampa, Florida, where workers will soon break ground on a new high-speed railroad funded by the Recovery Act. There are projects like that all across this country that will create jobs and help move our nation's goods, services, and information. We should put more Americans to work building clean energy facilities and give rebates to Americans who make their homes more energy efficient, which supports clean energy jobs. And to encourage these and other businesses to stay within our borders, it is time to finally slash the tax breaks for companies that ship our jobs overseas and give those tax breaks to companies that create jobs right here in the United States of America. Now, the House has passed a jobs bill that includes some of these steps. As the first order of business this year, I urge the Senate to do the same, and I know they will. They will. People are out of work. They're hurting. They need our help. And I want a jobs bill on my desk without delay. But the truth is, these steps won't make up for the 7 million jobs that we've lost over the last 2 years. The only way to move to full employment is to lay a new foundation for long-term economic growth and finally address the problems that America's families have confronted for years. We can't afford another so-called economic expansion like the one from the last decade, what some call the lost decade, where jobs grew more slowly than during any prior expansion. where the income of the average American household declined while the cost of health care and tuition reached record highs, where prosperity was built on a housing bubble and financial speculation. From the day I took office, I've been told that addressing our larger challenges is too ambitious. Such an effort would be too contentious. I've been told that our political system is too gridlocked and that we should just put things on hold for a while. For those who make these claims, I have one simple question. How long should we wait? How long should America put its future on hold? You see, Washington has been telling us to wait for decades, even as the problems have grown worse. Meanwhile, China's not waiting to revamp its economy. Germany's not waiting. India's not waiting. These nations they're not standing still. These nations aren't playing for second place. They're putting more emphasis on math and science. They're rebuilding their infrastructure. They're making serious investments in clean energy because they want those jobs. Well, I do not accept second place for the United States of America. As hard as it may be, as uncomfortable and contentious as the debates may become, it's time to get serious about fixing the problems that are hampering our growth. Now, one place to start is serious financial reform. Look, I am not interested in punishing banks. I'm interested in protecting our economy. A strong, healthy financial market makes it possible for businesses to access credit and create new jobs. It channels the savings of families into investments that raise incomes. But that can only happen if we guard against the same recklessness that nearly brought down our entire economy. We need to make sure consumers and middle-class families have the information they need to make financial decisions. We can't allow financial institutions, including those that take your deposits, to take risks that threaten the whole economy. Now, the House has already passed financial reform with many of these changes. And the lobbyists are trying to kill it. Well, we cannot let them win this fight. And if the bill that ends up on my desk does not meet the test of real reform, I will send it back until we get it right. We've got to get it right. Next, we need to encourage American innovation. Last year, we made the largest investment in basic research funding in history. An investment that could lead to the world's cheapest solar cells, or treatment that kills cancer cells but leaves healthy ones untouched. And no area is more ripe for such innovation than energy. You can see the results of last year's investments in clean energy. In the North Carolina company that will create 1,200 jobs nationwide helping to make advanced batteries, or in the California business that will put 1,000 people to work making solar panels. But to create more of these clean energy jobs, we need more production, more efficiency, more incentives. And that means building a new generation of safe, clean nuclear power plants in this country. It means making tough decisions about opening new offshore areas for oil and gas development. It means continued investment in advanced biofuels and clean coal technologies. And yes, it means passing a comprehensive energy and climate bill with incentives that will finally make clean energy the profitable kind of energy in America. I'm grateful to the House for passing such a bill last year. And this year I'm eager to help advance the bipartisan effort in the Senate. I know there have been questions about whether we can afford such changes in a tough economy. I know that there are those who disagree with the overwhelming scientific evidence on climate change. But here's the thing. Even if you doubt the evidence, providing incentives for energy efficiency and clean energy are the right thing to do for our future, because the nation that leads the clean energy economy will be the nation that leads the global economy, and America must be that nation. Third, we need to export more of our goods. Because the more products we make and sell to other countries, the more jobs we support right here in America. So tonight we set a new goal. We will double our exports over the next 5 years, an increase that will support 2 million jobs in America. To help meet this goal, we're launching a national export initiative that will help farmers and small businesses increase their exports and reform export controls consistent with national security. We have to seek new markets aggressively, just as our competitors are. If America sits on the sidelines while other nations sign trade deals, we will lose the chance to create jobs on our shores. But realizing those benefits also means enforcing those agreements so our trading partners play by the rules. And that's why we'll continue to shape a Doha trade agreement that opens global markets, and why we will strengthen our trade relations in Asia and with key partners like South Korea and Panama and Colombia. Fourth, we need to invest in the skills and education of our people. Now, this year, we've broken through the stalemate between left and right by launching a national competition to improve our schools. And the idea here is simple. Instead of rewarding failure, we only reward success. Instead of funding the status quo, we only invest in reform. Reform that raises student achievement, inspires students to excel in math and science, and turns around failing schools that steal the future of too many young Americans, from rural communities to the inner city. In the 21st century, the best anti-poverty program around is a world-class education. And in this country, the success of our children cannot depend more on where they live than on their potential. When we renew the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, we will work with Congress to expand these reforms to all 50 states. Still, in this economy, a high school diploma no longer guarantees a good job. That's why I urge the Senate to follow the House and pass a bill that will revitalize our community colleges, which are a career pathway to the children of so many working families. To make college more affordable, this bill will finally end the unwarranted taxpayer subsidies that go to banks for student loans. Instead, let's take that money and give families a $10,000 tax credit for 4 years of college and increase Pell Grants. And let's tell another 1 million students that when they graduate, they will be required to pay only 10% of their income on student loans. And all of their debt will be forgiven after 20 years, and forgiven after 10 years if they choose a career in public service. Because in the United States of America, no one should go broke because they chose to go to college. And by the way, it's time for colleges and universities to get serious about cutting their own costs, because they too have a responsibility to help solve this problem. Now, the price of college tuition is just one of the burdens facing the middle class. That's why last year I asked Vice President Biden to chair a task force on middle-class families. That's why we're nearly doubling the child care tax credit and making it easier to save for retirement by giving access to every worker a retirement account and expanding the tax credit for those who start a nest egg. That's why we're working to lift the value of a family's single largest investment, their home. The steps we took last year to shore up the housing market have allowed millions of Americans to take out new loans and save an average of $1,500 on mortgage payments. This year, we will step up refinancing so that homeowners can move into more affordable mortgages. And it is precisely to relieve the burden on middle-class families that we still need health insurance reform. Now, let's clear a few things up. I didn't choose to tackle this issue to get some legislative victory under my belt. And by now, it should be fairly obvious that I didn't take on health care because it was good politics. I took on health care because of the stories I've heard from Americans with pre-existing conditions whose lives depend on getting coverage, patients who've been denied coverage, families, even those with insurance, who are just one illness away from financial ruin. After nearly a century of trying, Democratic administrations, Republican administrations, we are closer than ever to bringing more security to the lives of so many Americans. The approach we've taken would protect every American from the worst practices of the insurance industry. It would give small businesses and uninsured Americans a chance to choose an affordable health care plan in a competitive market. It would require every insurance plan to cover preventive care. And by the way, I want to acknowledge our First Lady, Michelle Obama, who this year is creating a national movement to tackle the epidemic of childhood obesity and make kids healthier. Thank you, honey. She gets embarrassed. Our approach would preserve the right of Americans who have insurance to keep their doctor and their plan. It would reduce costs and premiums for millions of families and businesses. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, the independent organization that both parties have cited as the official scorekeeper for Congress, our approach would bring down the deficit by as much as $1 trillion over the next 2 decades. Still, this is a complex issue, and the longer it was debated, the more skeptical people became. I take my share of the blame for not explaining it more clearly to the American people. And I know that with all the lobbying and horse trading, the process left most Americans wondering, what's in it for me? But I also know this problem is not going away. By the time I'm finished speaking tonight, more Americans will have lost their health insurance. Millions will lose it this year. Our deficit will grow. Premiums will go up. Patients will be denied the care they need. Small business owners will continue to drop coverage altogether. I will not walk away from these Americans, and neither should the people in this chamber. So, as temperatures cool, I want everyone to take another look at the plan we've proposed. There's a reason why many doctors, nurses, and healthcare experts who know our system best consider this approach a vast improvement over the status quo. But if anyone from either party has a better approach that will bring down premiums, bring down the deficit, cover the uninsured, strengthen Medicare for seniors, and stop insurance company abuses, let me know. Let me know. Let me know. I'm eager to see it. Here's what I ask Congress, though. Don't walk away from reform. Not now. Not when we are so close. Let us find a way to come together and finish the job for the American people. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. Now, even as health care reform would reduce our deficit, it's not enough to dig us out of a massive fiscal hole in which we find ourselves. It's a challenge that makes all others that much harder to solve, and one that's been subject to a lot of political posturing. So let me start the discussion of government spending by setting the record straight. At the beginning of the last decade, the year 2000, America had a budget surplus of over $200 billion. By the time I took office, we had a one-year deficit of over $1 trillion and projected deficits of $8 trillion over the next decade. Most of this was the result of not paying for 2 wars, 2 tax cuts, and an expensive prescription drug program. On top of that, the effects of the recession put a $3 trillion hole in our budget. All this was before I walked in the door. Now, just stating the facts. Now, if we had taken office in ordinary times, I would have liked nothing more than to start bringing down the deficit. But we took office amid a crisis. And our efforts to prevent a second depression have added another $1 trillion to our national debt. That, too, is a fact. I'm absolutely convinced that was the right thing to do. But families across the country are tightening their belts and making tough decisions. The federal government should do the same. So tonight, I'm proposing specific steps to pay for the $1 trillion that it took to rescue the economy last year. Starting in 2011, we are prepared to freeze government spending for 3 years. Spending related to our national security, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security will not be affected. But all other discretionary government programs will. Like any cash-strapped family, we will work within a budget to invest in what we need and sacrifice what we don't. And if I have to enforce this discipline by veto, I will. We will continue to go through the budget, line by line, page by page, to eliminate programs that we can't afford and don't work. We've already identified $20 billion in savings for next year. To help working families, we'll extend our middle-class tax cuts. But at a time of record deficits, we will not continue tax cuts for oil companies, for investment fund managers, and for those making over $250,000 a year. We just can't afford it. Now, even after paying for what we spent on my watch, we'll still face the massive deficit we had when I took office. More importantly, the cost of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security will continue to skyrocket. That's why I've called for a bipartisan fiscal commission, modeled on a proposal by Republican Judd Gregg and Democrat Ken Conrad. This can't be one of those Washington gimmicks that lets us pretend we solve a problem. The commission will have to provide a specific set of solutions by a certain deadline. Yesterday, the Senate blocked a bill that would have created this commission. So I'll issue an executive order that will allow us to go forward, because I refuse to pass this problem on to another generation of Americans. And when the vote comes tomorrow, the Senate should restore the pay-as-you-go law that was a big reason for why we had record surpluses in the 1990s. Now, I know that some in my own party will argue that we can't address the deficit or freeze government spending when so many are still hurting. And I agree, which is why this freeze won't take effect until next year, when the economy is stronger. That's how budgeting works. But understand, if we don't take meaningful steps to rein in our debt, it could damage our markets, increase the cost of borrowing, and jeopardize our recovery, all of which would have an even worse effect on our job growth and family incomes. From some on the right, I expect we'll hear a different argument. If we just make fewer investments in our people, extend tax cuts, including those for the wealthier Americans, eliminate more regulations, maintain the status quo on health care, our deficits will go away. The problem is, that's what we did for 8 years. That's what helped us into this crisis. It's what helped lead to these deficits. We can't do it again. Rather than fight the same tired battles that have dominated Washington for decades, it's time to try something new. Let's invest in our people without leaving them a mountain of debt. Let's meet our responsibility to the citizens who sent us here. Let's try common sense. A novel concept. Now, to do that, we have to recognize that we face more than a deficit of dollars right now. We face a deficit of trust. Deep and corrosive doubts about how Washington works that have been growing for years. To close that credibility gap, we have to take action on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. To end the outsized influence of lobbyists. To do our work openly. To give our people the government they deserve. That's what I came to Washington to do. That's why, for the first time in history, my administration posts on our White House visitors online. That's why we've excluded lobbyists from policymaking jobs or seats on federal boards and commissions. But we can't stop there. It's time to require lobbyists to disclose each contact they make on behalf of a client with my administration or with Congress. It's time to put strict limits on the contributions that lobbyists give to candidates for federal office. With all due deference to separation of powers, last week the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections. I don't think American elections should be bankrolled by America's most powerful interests, or worse, by foreign entities. They should be decided by the American people. And I'd urge Democrats and Republicans to pass a bill that helps correct some of these problems. I'm also calling on Congress to continue down the path of earmark reform. Democrats and Republicans. Democrats and Republicans, look, you've trimmed some of this spending. You've embraced some meaningful change. But restoring the public trust demands more. For example, some members of Congress post some earmark requests online. Tonight, I'm calling on Congress to publish all earmark requests on a single website before there's a vote, so that the American people can see how their money is being spent. Of course, none of these reforms will even happen if we don't also reform how we work with one another. Now, I'm not naive. I never thought that the mere fact of my election would usher in peace and harmony in some post-partisan era. I knew that both parties have fed divisions that are deeply entrenched. And on some issues, there are simply philosophical differences that will always cause us to part ways. These disagreements about the role of government in our lives, about our national priorities and our national security, they've been taking place for over 200 years. They're the very essence of our democracy. But what frustrates the American people is a Washington where every day is election day. We can't wage a perpetual campaign where the only goal is to see who can get the most embarrassing headlines about the other side. A belief that if you lose, I win. Neither party should delay or obstruct every single bill just because they can. The confirmation of I'm speaking to both parties now. The confirmation of well-qualified public servants shouldn't be held hostage to the pet projects or grudges of a few individual senators. Washington may think that saying anything about the other side, no matter how false, no matter how malicious, is just part of the game. But it's precisely such politics that has stopped either party from helping the American people. Worse yet, it's sowing further division among our citizens, further distrust in our government. So no, I will not give up on trying to change the tone of our politics. I know it's an election year, and after last week, it's clear that campaign fever has come even earlier than usual. But we still need to govern. To Democrats, I would remind you that we still have the largest majority in decades, and the people expect us to solve problems, not run for the hills. And if the Republican leadership is going to insist that 60 votes in the Senate are required to do any business at all in this town, a supermajority, then the responsibility to govern is now yours as well. Just saying no to everything may be good short-term politics, but it's not leadership. We were sent here to serve our citizens, not our ambitions. So let's show the American people that we can do it together. This week I'll be addressing a meeting of the House Republicans. I'd like to begin monthly meetings with both Democratic and Republican leadership. I know you can't wait. Now, throughout our history, no issue has united this country more than our security. Sadly, some of the unity we felt after 9/11 has dissipated. And we can argue all we want about who's to blame for this, but I'm not interested in relitigating the past. I know that all of us love this country. All of us are committed to its defense. So let's put aside the schoolyard taunts about who's tough. Let's reject the false choice between protecting our people and upholding our values. Let's leave behind the fear and division and do what it takes to defend our nation and forge a more hopeful future for America and for the world. That's the work we began last year. Since the day I took office, we've renewed our focus on the terrorists who threaten our nation. We've made substantial investments in our homeland security and disrupted plots that threaten to take American lives. We are filling unacceptable gaps revealed by the failed Christmas attack with better airline security and swifter action on our intelligence. We've prohibited torture and strengthened partnerships from the Pacific to South Asia to the Arabian Peninsula. And in the last year, hundreds of al-Qaeda's fighters and affiliates, including many senior leaders, have been captured or killed, far more than in 2008. And in Afghanistan, we're increasing our troops and training Afghan security forces so they can begin to take the lead in July of 2011 and our troops can begin to come home. We will reward good governance, work to reduce corruption, and support the rights of all Afghans, men and women alike. we're joined by allies and partners who have increased their own commitments and who will come together tomorrow in London to reaffirm our common purpose. There will be difficult days ahead, but I am absolutely confident we will succeed. As we take the fight to al-Qaeda, we are responsibly leaving Iraq to its people. As a candidate, I promised that I would end this war, and that is what I'm doing as president. We will have all of our combat troops out of Iraq by the end of this August. We will support the Iraqi government. We will support the Iraqi government as they hold elections, and we will continue to partner with the Iraqi people to promote regional peace and prosperity. But make no mistake, this war is ending, and all of our troops are coming home. Tonight, all of our men and women in uniform, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and around the world, they have to know that that they have our respect, our gratitude, our full support. And just as they must have the resources they need in war, we all have a responsibility to support them when they come home. That's why we made the largest increase in investments for veterans in decades. Last year. That's why we're building a 21st century VA. And that's why Michelle has joined with Jill Biden to forge a national commitment to support military families. Now, even as we prosecute two wars, we're also confronting perhaps the greatest danger to the American people, the threat of nuclear weapons. I've embraced the vision of John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan through a strategy that reverses the spread of these weapons and seeks a world without them. To reduce our stockpiles and launchers while ensuring our deterrent, the United States and Russia are completing negotiations on the farthest-reaching arms control treaty in nearly 2 decades. And at April's Nuclear Security Summit, we will bring 44 nations together here in Washington, D.C. behind a clear goal: securing all vulnerable nuclear materials around the world in 4 years so that they never fall into the hands of terrorists. Now, these diplomatic efforts have also strengthened our hand in dealing with those nations that insist on violating international agreements in pursuit of nuclear weapons. That's why North Korea now faces increased isolation and stronger sanctions, sanctions that are being vigorously enforced. That's why the international community is more united and the Islamic Republic of Iran is more isolated. And as Iran's leaders continue to ignore their obligations, there should be no doubt they too will face growing consequences. That is a promise. That's the leadership we are providing. Engagement that advances the common security and prosperity of all people. We're working through the G20 to sustain a lasting global recovery. We're working with Muslim communities around the world to promote science and education and innovation. We have gone from a bystander to a leader in the fight against climate change. We're helping developing countries to feed themselves and continuing the fight against HIV/AIDS. And we are launching a new initiative that will give us the capacity to respond faster and more effectively to bioterrorism or an infectious disease, a plan that will counter threats at home and strengthen public health abroad. As we have for over 60 years, America takes these actions because our destiny is connected to those beyond our shores. But we also do it because it is right. That's why, as we meet here tonight, over 10,000 Americans are working with many nations to help the people of Haiti recover and rebuild. That's why we stand with the girl who yearns to go to school in Afghanistan, why we support the human rights of the women marching through the streets of Iran, why we advocate for the young man denied a job by corruption in Guinea. For America must always stand on the side of freedom and human dignity. Always. Abroad, America's greatest source of strength has always been our ideals. The same is true at home. We find unity in our incredible diversity, drawing on the promise enshrined in our Constitution. The notion that we're all created equal, that no matter who you are or what you look like, if you abide by the law, you should be protected by it. If you adhere to our common values, you should be treated no different than anyone else. We must continually renew this promise. My administration has a civil rights division that is once again prosecuting civil rights violations and employment discrimination. We finally strengthened our laws to protect against crimes driven by hate. This year, I will work with Congress and our military to finally repeal the law that denies gay Americans the right to serve the country they love because of who they are. It's the right thing to do. We're going to crack down on violations of equal pay laws so that women get equal pay for an equal day's work. And we should continue the work of fixing our broken immigration system to secure our borders and enforce our laws and ensure that everyone who plays by the rules can contribute to our economy and enrich our nations. In the end, it's our ideals, our values that built America. Values that allowed us to forge a nation made up of immigrants from every corner of the globe. Values that drive our citizens still. Every day, Americans meet their responsibilities to their families and their employers. Time and again, they lend a hand to their neighbors and give back to their country. They take pride in their labor and are generous in spirit. These aren't Republican values or Democratic values that they're living by, business values or labor values. They're American values. Unfortunately, too many of our citizens have lost faith that our biggest institutions, our corporations, our media, and yes, our government, still reflect these same values. Each of these institutions are full of honorable men and women doing important work that helps our country prosper. But each time a CEO rewards himself for failure, or a banker puts the rest of us at risk for his own selfish gain, people's doubts grow. Each time lobbyists game the system or politicians tear each other down instead of lifting this country up, we lose faith. The more that TV pundits reduce serious debates to silly arguments, big issues into sound bites, our citizens turn away. No wonder there's so much cynicism out there. No wonder there's so much disappointment. I campaigned on the promise of change. Change we can believe in, the slogan went. And right now I know there are many Americans who aren't sure if they still believe we can change, or that I can deliver it. But remember this, I never suggested the change would be easy, or that I could do it alone. Democracy in a nation of 300 million people can be noisy and messy and complicated. And when you try to do big things and make big changes, it stirs passions and controversy. That's just how it is. Those of us in public office can respond to this reality by playing it safe and avoid telling hard truths and pointing fingers. We can do what's necessary to keep our poll numbers high and get through the next election, instead of doing what's best for the next generation. But I also know this. If people had made that decision 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, we wouldn't be here tonight. The only reason we are here is because generations of Americans were unafraid to do what was hard, to do what was needed even when success was uncertain, to do what it took to keep the dream of this nation alive for their children and their grandchildren. Our administration has had some political setbacks this year, and some of them were deserved. But I wake up every day knowing that they are nothing compared to the setbacks that families all across this country have faced this year. And what keeps me going, what keeps me fighting, is that despite all these setbacks, that spirit of determination and optimism, that fundamental decency that has always been at the core of the American people, that lives on. It lives on in the struggling small business owner who wrote to me of his company. None of us, he said, are willing to consider even slightly that we might fail. It lives on in the woman who said that even though she and her neighbors have felt the pain of recession, we are strong, we are resilient, we are American. It lives on in the 8-year-old boy in Louisiana who just sent me his allowance and asked if I would give it to the people of Haiti. And it lives on in all the Americans who've dropped everything to go someplace they've never been and pull people they've never known from the rubble, prompting chants of USA, 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 when another life was saved. The spirit that has sustained this nation for more than 2 centuries lives on in you, its people. We have finished a difficult year. We have come through a difficult decade. But a new year has come. A new decade stretches before us. We don't quit. I don't quit. Let's seize this moment to start anew, to carry the dream forward, and to strengthen our union once more. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
The president versus the big banks, the big insurers, big unemployment, daring the Republicans not to join him as he challenges those tasks, those individuals, and others. The question, as we rejoin you, to Rachel Maddow and Chris Matthews, will the Republicans take the dare? And if so, if they don't cooperate, Rachel, will the American public side with the president or with the reaction against incumbents that we've seen heretofore in this administration?
Keith, I think that it depends on whether we believe that speeches change things. And I've never been one of those people that does stupid body language analysis in politics. But if there is body language to read in this, to go watch the Republican side of the chamber sitting stiffly, refusing to applaud, refusing to even acknowledge the president, the fact that the president was giving a speech for much of the night, at the beginning of the speech, by the end of it, frequently getting to their feet, frequently applauding the president, not all of them all at once, sometimes being led by different Republicans, but a little Republican resolve seemed to be wilting tonight just over the course of the speech. We'll see if that holds, if that translates into legislative action.
Chris, did you see that too? And was that kind of a box-in maneuver in which you make an opposition agree to things that are obvious and fundamental? Did the president pull off a little bit of a political full court press?
Well, it wasn't rope-a-dope, I'll tell you that. It was much more positive and much more seductive. I agree completely. I think the turn came around when he asked them on about the third or fourth time, are they going to join him on health care? And I think they were aware of how they would look if they hadn't joined him at that point. I don't think the camera work was that good tonight. It was pretty, but it wasn't useful. It wasn't close enough in on them, I thought. Rachel picked it up. I picked it up a little bit, but I do think he was so blithe, so totally open to a bipartisan approach, we're past racialism in this country, we're past stupid partisanship. I think it's going to be very hard for them to come on later tonight and take shots at him. I think at least tonight he will win the argument for getting together. Tonight he will, I think.
Rachel,
I agree with Rachel.
Yeah, did he, obviously to some degree, and I don't know that this would be emphasized by the White House, but to some degree this was about getting the audience back in show business terms. Do you think he did that?
Well, I think that I said before the speech that I didn't think there would be a lot to excite the base, and I think that's true in policy terms. I think what the base will like, and what people in the middle and moderates might like, is the sort of playful feistiness of his tone. He definitely had a little combativeness to it, but with a smile, and that sort of "I won't quit" ending, I think, is going to appeal to a lot of people in tone. In terms of the actual policies that he put forward, Chris is right that the way that, and you're right, Keith, in your analysis, that the way he got Republicans to start standing up is by asking them to cheer for things like, tax cuts, or the basic idea of health reform. Other things that I think sap some of the anti-Obama talking points that the right has used against him. He just didn't seem all that left-wing tonight in the policies that he put forward.
On the other hand, Chris, he did call out the Republicans and the use of the 60 vote, or the need for the 60 vote supermajority. And he also, when they scoffed at the idea of this limited domestic spending freeze taking effect next year, he ad-libbed, since we have a copy of the advanced script, he ad-libbed that line about that's how budgeting works, which got a big laugh. And I'm being complimentary, but there were two masters were being served in this speech. Whatever he was trying to drag bipartisanship along and out of, at the same time, there were still a few shots taken that might have been for the benefit of the base or just for the benefit of his own presidency.
No, he's pretty sharp on defense. In fact, he's ready to swat back. That was a swat back right at them. You guys ought to know that we budget for next year. That's what you do for a living. You pass the budget. That's what you do. You can take your cheap shot at me for not cutting right now, but we're setting a budget for FY11. I'll tell you what the headline of the Wall Street Journal is going to be tomorrow. He's cutting off the tax cuts at the end of their period. He's going to let them sunset, as they say in Washington. They're going to pick that headline up. He may have buried it in there. No more tax cuts for the better off after this Bush run is over. I think that's going to be a lead. I mean, the jobs thing bugged me because it was only $30 billion. That's 0.25% of our GDP. I would like to see rapid rail. I would like to see Monahan Station opened up in New York. I'd like to see an entire continental train system put together at high speed. But he didn't do that. He began that. I think people are going to think that's a boutique look at rapid rail compared to the rest of the world.
As we wait for the Republican response, which will come from the new governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell, in a matter of minutes, 4 minutes hence is the scheduled time, the bottom of the hour, roughly. Rachel, there was a lot in here about something we addressed earlier, whether or not there would be not anyone would call it class warfare, but the idea of Main Street versus Wall Street, a comparison, a contrast that he made moments into this speech. And I'm wondering if that's the takeaway here from the average American watching this tonight, that, okay, well, this guy, maybe he is on my side, no matter what his politicians say and what the opposition politicians say.
That was an early moment in the speech, and my note on that was ready-made campaign ad. Yeah. At this point in the speech, Republicans not standing up, not saying that they will support the fee on the banks to get them to pay back the bailout money. To put that stuff up there, I felt like at the start of the speech it was going to be a much more partisan speech than it was, because he did really box in the Republicans and make them look very anti-populist by them not supporting the bank fee, not supporting paying back the banks, the bank bailout. Are you kidding? Not supporting Republicans not standing and supporting his proposal, this long-standing proposal that's been out there forever, to take away the subsidies for businesses that offshore their jobs. Those are all very populist measures. Republicans not supporting them, and I think the president putting them on a spot by making them demonstrate that with their lack of applause.
Indeed, Chris, at one point he said, we all hated the bank bailout. He was not necessarily talking about or to the Republicans. He was talking past them and past you and I and Rachel.
Well, thank God he said that, because everybody does. You know, I was trying to think about who he was tonight, and it's interesting. He is post-racial, by all appearances. You know, I forgot he was black tonight for an hour. You know, he's gone a long way to become a leader of this country and passed so much history in just a year or two. I mean, it's something we don't even think about. I was watching, I said, wait a minute, he's an African-American guy in front of a bunch of other white people, and there he is, President of the United States, and we've completely forgotten that tonight. Completely forgotten it. I think it was in the scope of his discussion. It was so broad-ranging, so in tune with so many problems and aspects of American life, that you don't think in terms of the old tribalism, the old ethnicity. It was astounding in that regard, a very subtle fact. It's so hard to even talk about. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it, but I am. I thought it was profound that way. And I think in terms of the seduction tonight, I don't think he did anything tonight out of love for Republicans or deep understanding of people who disagree with him. He's probably incredibly frustrated by the failure of a single Republican senator to step up and say, we got to do something about health care. I'm challenging my caucus on this one. I'm with you, buddy. I'm a profile and courage. Not a single Republican. That has got to frustrate a guy who has tried to reach out. He's willing to go for tort reform. He's willing to take on the trial lawyers, I believe, if he could get a dozen Republicans or even half a dozen to join him. He wants bipartisanship. They have decided to close the door on bipartisanship. I watched Cornyn tonight. Watch the chairman of their campaign committee. Watch that chuckle face on McConnell tonight. He's chuckling away because he thinks the Just Say No party can win big this November. And unfortunately, he may be right. And that would not be a good vote by the American people, to just vote for a party that sits on its keister and chuckles during a very bad recession. And unfortunately, that may be smart politics. But you know what? As they say in The Godfather, the smart move gets you garroted sometimes, you know. Clemenza would have done it was the smart move, but you know what happened to Tezio? The smart move got him killed. So I sometimes like the people that think they do this smart. I can't, all guys do this. We can't avoid Godfather conversations, but there we go.
Conveniently, the Republican response is going to take us out of the Godfather conversation in a matter of seconds, and we go to the State House in Virginia for that newly elected governor, preparing, as you see, in front of a live audience, which is a staging improvement for the Republicans after Bobby Jindal's speech a year ago. Here is Governor Bob McDonnell of Virginia.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Bob McDonnell. 11 days ago, I was honored to be sworn in as the 71st governor of Virginia. I'm standing in the historic House chamber of Virginia's Capitol, a building designed by Virginia's second governor, Thomas Jefferson. It's not easy to follow the President of the United States, and my 18-year-old twin boys have added pressure to me tonight by giving me exactly 10 minutes to finish before they leave to go watch SportsCenter. I'm joined by fellow Virginians to share a Republican perspective on how to best address the challenges facing our nation today. We were encouraged to hear President Obama speak this evening about the need to create jobs. All Americans should have the opportunity to find and keep meaningful work and the dignity that comes with it. Many of us here tonight, and many of you watching, have family or friends who have lost their jobs. In fact, 1 in 10 Americans is unemployed. That is unacceptable. Here in Virginia, we face our highest unemployment rate in more than 25 years, and bringing new jobs and more opportunities to our citizens is the top priority of my administration. Good government policy should spur economic growth and strengthen the private sector's ability to create new jobs. We must enact policies that promote entrepreneurship and innovation so America can better compete with the world. What government should not do is pile on more taxation, regulation, and litigation that kill jobs and hurt the middle class. It was Thomas Jefferson who called for a wise and frugal government which shall leave men free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. He was right. Today, the federal government is simply trying to do too much. Last year, we were told that massive new federal spending would create more jobs immediately and hold unemployment below 8%. In the past year, more than 3 million people have lost their jobs, and yet the Democratic Congress continues deficit spending, adding to the bureaucracy and increasing the national debt on our children and our grandchildren. The amount of debt is on pace to double in 5 years and triple in 10. The federal debt is now over $100,000 per household. This is simply unsustainable. The President's partial freeze announced tonight on discretionary spending is a laudable step, but a small one. The circumstances of our time demand that we reconsider and restore the proper limited role of government at every level. Without reform, the excessive growth of government threatens our very liberty and our prosperity. In recent months, the American people have made clear that they want government leaders to listen and then act on the issues most important to them. We want results, not rhetoric. We want cooperation, not partisanship. There is much common ground. All Americans agree that we need a health care system that is affordable, accessible, and high quality. But most Americans do not want to turn over the best medical care system in the world to the federal government. Republicans in Congress have offered legislation to reform health care without shifting Medicaid costs to the states, without cutting Medicare, and without raising your taxes. And we will do that by implementing common sense reforms, like letting families and businesses buy health care insurance policies across state lines, and ending frivolous lawsuits against doctors and hospitals that drive up the cost of your health care. And our solutions aren't 1,000-page bills that no one has fully read after being crafted behind closed doors with special interests. In fact, many of our proposals are available online at solutions.gop.gov. And we welcome your ideas on Facebook and Twitter. All Americans agree that this nation must become more energy independent and secure. We are blessed here in America with vast natural resources, and we must use them all. Advances in technology can unleash more natural gas, nuclear, wind, coal, alternative energy that will lower your utility bills. Here in Virginia, we have the opportunity to become the first state on the East Coast to explore for and produce oil and natural gas offshore. But this administration's policies are delaying offshore production, hindering nuclear energy expansion, and seeking to impose job-killing cap-and-trade energy taxes. Now is the time to adopt innovative energy policies that create jobs and lower energy prices. All Americans agree that a young person needs a world-class education to compete in the global economy. As a young kid, my dad told me, son, if you want a good job, you need a good education. Dad was right, and that's even more true today. The President and I agree on expanding the number of high-quality charter schools and rewarding teachers for excellent performance. More school choices for parents and students mean more accountability and greater achievement. A child's educational opportunity should be determined by her intellect and work ethic, not by her zip code. All Americans agree that we must maintain a strong national defense. The courage and success of our armed forces is allowing us to draw down troop levels in Iraq as that government is increasingly able to step up. My oldest daughter, Janine, was an Army platoon leader in Iraq, so I am personally grateful for the service and sacrifice of all our men and women in uniform, and a grateful nation thanks them. We applaud President Obama's decision to deploy 30,000 more troops to Afghanistan. We agree that victory there is imperative for national security. But we have serious concerns over the recent steps the administration has taken regarding suspected terrorists. Americans were shocked on Christmas Day to learn of the attempted bombing of a flight to Detroit. This foreign terrorist suspect was given the same legal rights as a U.S. citizen and immediately stopped providing critical intelligence. As Senator-elect Scott Brown has said, we should be spending taxpayer dollars to defeat terrorists, not to protect them. Here at home, government must help foster a society in which all our people can use their God-given talents and liberty to pursue their great American dream. Republicans know that government cannot guarantee individual outcomes, but we strongly believe that it must guarantee equality of opportunity for all. That opportunity exists best in a democracy which promotes free enterprise, economic growth, strong families, and individual achievement. Many Americans are concerned about this administration's effort to exert greater control over car companies, banks, energy, and health care. But over-regulating employers won't create more employment. Overtaxing investors won't foster more investment. Top-down, one-size-fits-all decision-making should not replace the personal choices of free people in a free market, nor undermine the proper role of state and local governments in our system of federalism. As our founders clearly stated, and we governors clearly understand, government closest to the people governs best. And no government program can ever replace the actions of caring Americans freely choosing to help one another. The scriptures say, to whom much is given, much will be required. As the most generous and prosperous nation on earth, it is heartwarming to see Americans giving much time and money to the people of Haiti. Thank you for your ongoing compassion. Some people say they're afraid that America is no longer the great land of promise that she has always been. They should not be. America will always blaze the trail of opportunity and prosperity. America must always be a land where liberty and property are valued and respected, and innocent human life is protected. Government should have this clear goal. Where opportunity is absent, we must create it. Where opportunity is limited, we must expand it. Where opportunity is unequal, we must make it open to everyone. Our founders pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to create this great nation. Now we should pledge, as Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, Americans all, to work together to leave this nation an even better place than we found it. God bless you, and God bless this great land of America. Thank you very much.
The Republican response to the State of the Union from Governor Bob McDonnell of Virginia, and here is, I think, the problem with the staging, as much of an improvement as that scene is over past ones. He has been governor for 11 days, and nationally nobody knows who he is. Perhaps more importantly, the only other individual he quoted in there was a senator who was elected last week, and no one knows who those other people are. It creates something of a disconnect, and one substantive one. Chris, let me just ask you this quickly. Will we ever get a response, either given by a Republican or a Democrat under whatever circumstances, that actually addresses what was said in the previous speech?
No, because they refused to do that. And this is true when the Democrats were in power as well. Neither party has a person capable of reading a speech and reacting to it. I don't know why they don't do it. It would be dynamite in news production. It would go right with the news cycle and would all be reporting it. There's nothing there that's news. There's nothing to report.
I couldn't agree more with you. Let me switch back to Rachel in our last minute and a half, because there was something that took about 35 seconds of the President's State of the Union address tonight, and it has monumental import, and I would like you to address it in our final minute or so. The very sort of under the radar, low-key announcement that he is pushing to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military.
We're going to have Lieutenant Colonel Victor Fehrenbach addressing that in person tonight in my show this hour, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing his take on it. The president has in the past pledged to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He said as a candidate he'd do it in his first year. He did not make that. He's made that pledge personally to Lieutenant Colonel Fehrenbach, who's one of the people who's facing getting kicked out under that policy. Those who want to get rid of this policy really hope that this means there's going to be some new fire in the White House toward pushing for it. John McCain tonight already releasing a written statement saying he opposes the repeal.
Yeah. Rachel Maddow, who will be back in 1 hour with a live edition of The Rachel Maddow Show at 11:45 p.m. Eastern, to which we encourage you to watch. And Chris Matthews, who has been with us before and after tonight's speeches. I thank you both. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Keith.
Good night, Keith.
And a live post-State of the Union countdown special edition starts now.